here. We got a quorum for now. I just love, I just look at this list and I'm like, man, I'm in freaking LA and there's Tunisia, Britain, New Delhi, two people from Florida, New York City. I'm actually surprised no one from San Francisco, but hey, it's all good. So let
I'm
us get
from
started.
San Francisco.
Oh, Alicia. All
Hi.
right. See, wouldn't be a quorum without someone from San
Yeah.
Francisco. And I say that with no shade. All right, so let us dive in. There's some familiar faces, some new faces, people I've got the pleasure of meeting across different social media platforms like Nezreen, Eric, who's a longtime OG from our Slack group, Alex from the Happy Hour, Eric, who's I've learned a ton from, and I actually never have seen his face before because he doesn't have any pictures in his avatars. So it's good to see you, Eric Newhard. And so today, I've been doing these since the quarantine started, just to deepen our sense of community, to learn and grow from one another, get to know each other, and really just continue to build this incredible community of people over at Rad Reads. So without further ado, so next week I'm starting. We're all going to do this Keystone Habit challenge. And the thinking behind this was that, depending on where you are, there's some glimmers that maybe not our old lives, but things might be resuming to some sense of normalcy. Things might start to open up again. And a lot of people, myself included, have really kind of thrown out a lot of good habits that we had kind of going into this, and have leaned on the crutches of dark chocolate or alcohol or Netflix skimming, as we deal with these uncertain times. And before we dive in there, I always acknowledge these calls by saying that if you're on a Zoom call with an internet connection talking about what habits you're going to build when the pandemic ends, we are in the 0.0001% of the global population. And so I just ask that we all just acknowledge that briefly and just really be grateful for that. And so today I just created, this is going to be super interactive. Why don't you guys, as I pull up the presentation, why don't you drop in to the chat either a habit that you're looking to make or form, or one that you're looking to break as we transition into this whatever this next chapter of our lives looks like. And then I will share my screen. Let's see. One second. All right. You might hear my kids in the background. All right. So give me a thumbs up if you could see the presentation. I see. All right. Cool. I don't have the chat in this mode, but let's see if I can pull that in. Oh, perfect. All right. All right. So let's I got the habits, I got the presentation, I got you on my screen. Let's get this started. So this is what you said when I surveyed you informally via email. Drinking was definitely the biggest one. Rebooting your fitness was the second largest. A lot of you, some kind of writing practice. Some of it was journaling, privately. Others was for more like blogging or starting an email newsletter. There was a few on waking up early, mindless scrolling, many of the things that we're seeing in the chat right now. Just in case you're curious about what was in the miscellaneous section, there was positive thinking. That was an interesting one that maybe we should talk about. I don't necessarily always associate positive thinking as a habit, but we could talk about that. Reading more and cleaning my house. For all the parents, I mean, all of us have to clean our house, but the parents who are, shout out to the two working parents with kids, because they definitely have it quite tough right now. So this is what you guys said. One person actually wrote, and it's always good to have the 10,000 foot view question in the first place, which is, what if I don't have a keystone habit, or what if I don't know what one would be for me? And actually, for many of us, we're probably so immersed in this lexicon that we just assume that people are going through their days wondering what their keystone habit is or should be. And so for that question, I actually relied on a few of my coaching prompts. Oops. And so these prompts help you really really think about the what do you want out of life, what are you missing, what are you seeking to develop. And so a few exercises, one that I love to ask my clients. I coach a lot of it, like entrepreneurs and executives, and so it's a visualization exercise. It's like, how would I spend my time? And I specifically say, how would I spend the next 5 years of my life if I had $1 billion? And you'd be amazed, for people who are quite high performing and have their shit together, they are speechless at this question. And it's a little bit of a trick question because, you can't really answer it with one thing, right? You can't say like, oh, I spend time with my kids. I think very few people want to spend, 14 waking hours with their kids. And if you do, bless you, I'm not one of those. So it's an interesting question to get you just visualizing it. And in this exercise, I have them think about, like, what are you wearing? Like, where do you eat? Where do you live? What's the weather like? What music are you listening to? And you can think about the habits as like, a step towards a step in that direction. A lot of people, when I ask them this question, they answer with something like, I take a photography class. I'm like, you're someone who makes like a healthy 6 figures, and you are waiting to have $1 billion to give yourself permission to take a photography class. Let's unpack that. Another prompt would be just accountability. Go to the key stakeholders in your life, whether it's your partner, your kids, your parents, your community, your direct reports, your boss, and ask them, what's something you think I would benefit from changing or adding into my life. Another one, again, it's Rad Reads, where I say, I'm jokingly using this tagline: productivity as the Trojan horse into the existential. And so I want to lure you in with like the latest GTD app, and then ask you, like, why do you want to work in the first, like, why do you even care about working, period? And so one great introspection question that my coach asks me all the time is, what's the pebble in my shoe? What is the thing that I'm walking and am mildly uncomfortable, and I know I should just like take off my shoe, take out the pebble and put it back on, yet I keep walking? What is that thing? It could be a bad relationship. It could be, I always think about Succession. I just watched that, where, Kendall drives the kid off into the pond at the end of season 1, and he's got to carry that for the rest of his life. Again, that's more than a pebble in your shoe. That's probably like 8 shards of glass that are causing your foot to bleed profusely. So, these questions, again, they help they serve as a true north to where you want to go. And then lastly, the classic Eisenhower matrix. What's important in your life but not urgent? The thing that you're going to snooze, that it's easy to hit snooze on. Getting better sleep. Flexibility. For me, flexibility is a big one. Getting older and my body's just not reacting anymore to intense exercise, lots of surfing, things that are really important to me. So these are some prompts. I would love either go off mute and just answer the question, or drop it in. But does anyone have any prompt or question that they use to prompt some kind of deeper self-reflection? Love to hear if anyone has one of those. All right, radio silence. So we'll come back to that one.
Hello.
Oh,
Hello.
yes, go for it.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So one of the things that I reflect a lot about is talking to my future self. I'm 27 right now, but and now with what's going on in the world, I am wondering what will be my future self. And I try to be as kind as possible to my future self and also to my present self and to my past self. So this is not an easy habit to maintain through time because we got caught up in the environment. But I think that setting the right environment for even this thinking process can be very beneficial.
Mm. And do you ask your future self a question, or is it?
Yeah, actually, it's more of a feeling. I always look for feeling being at peace of mind. And I think that you can have all the money of the world, but if you're not peaceful inside, you will not be able to live a fulfilling life. So actually, I read your article about like building an anti-fragile career, and it really resonated with me because now I'm still in the starting maybe mid-career, and I'm wondering on the direction of this career that it should go. So I'm prioritizing my well-being and mental health and relate deep connections and relationships and thinking about how I want to become
Mm.
and working for that.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Nesrin.
Thank you.
And we've got some good answers. I always ask what stories I would want my children's children to tell about me. That's a great one, Jenna. What would I do if I found out that I had a limited time to live? What would my priorities be? The classic memento mori, the reflection on death. So let's go to the next slide. So this is, you may have heard of the 4 steps of habit formation. It's originally, or maybe not, it's originally in the mainstream from Charles Duhigg, but it also was kind of readapted or rewritten about by James Clear and many other productivity folks. But it's basically the 4 steps of how habits take place in our brains and in our bodies. And so the first is, it's cue, craving, response, reward. And so the cue is something that sends a trigger to your brain that sets off a specific behavior. So it could be like seeing your phone. Like that's a big one for me. Seeing my laptop open. Or seeing a liquor cabinet. The craving is the feeling and the emotion that arises, and there's like, it's the excitement of gambling, or the calmness of alcohol, or the satiation of salt or chocolate, or the aggression of reading political news, the release of aggression of like your team's winning or your team losing, whatever. That's not the release. Then there's the response itself, right? Like the actual habit. And then there's some kind of reward that's unlocked. And I was talking with my own coach about alcohol, and he's like super Zen Buddhist, and he doesn't drink, like no caffeine, no alcohol, nothing. And he was just saying, like, yeah, alcohol just like, it like mystifies me. The release is so short. Um, it's like the shortest release of and like you keep needing to refill it. He's like, I just don't understand why people drink. And so there's different types of reward, which is like the dopamine of seeing how many emails, how many new emails you got, your bank account going up in a casino. So these are the 4 steps, which I took from Charles Duhigg. Then you have kind of strategies. Strategies or implementation strategies. And these are from James Clear's Atomic Habits. So it's cue, again, it's how you react to the cue, craving, response, and reward. And so for the cue, the first verb is, the first word is to add a habit, so make it obvious. So if you want to, the classic example is, putting your floss next to your toothbrush. So like most of us brush our teeth every day, and so seeing that cue is obvious, or making it invisible. And this has actually worked really well for me pre-quarantine, where I just never kept alcohol in my house. But now that you have to buy everything in batch, you bulk, you order up a lot because you want to minimize trips to the supermarket. Craving, making it attractive or unattractive. Here, there's a common strategy that Clear recommends is what he calls temptation bundling. And so you might, if you want to read more, you might, if you want to read more, you might say, you might combine it, or what's the right way? Okay, so here's a good one, temptation bundling. If you want to exercise more, you might not let yourself exercise into have your first cup of coffee until you've exercised. Or you might not let yourself have that cup of coffee until you meditate. And so you've bundled two habits. It's almost like a contingent reward, so to speak. The response is like making it easy or difficult. Again, a lot of this comes to like designing your environment. And so, for example, people who want to read more might leave like all their old Kindles and iPads scattered across their apartment with different with like the Kindle app, so you can always you're always seeing this book. And then there's the reward that is like making it satisfying or unsatisfying. And so here there's that dopamine release of like checking. There's accountability, telling your friend you did it, being proud about it, the pride that comes from it, habit trackers. So those are different ways to incorporate the reward. And so then lastly, I wanted to take some advanced strategies that some of you had shared with me via email. And so a good one is accountability. Someone shared that they had their morning workout crew where they would do CrossFit together. And so at the same time that they would normally do CrossFit in person, they have a standing 6:30 Zoom call where they work out like in their houses together. And so you don't want to be the person that doesn't show up to the group, especially because it's like your tribe. Another person said that they had a list on their to-do list of some good habits and bad habits that they moved around in their task manager based on which ones they thought they might be more susceptible to during the course of that day. And so that would be rearranging kind of that would be different cues. And then the last one was, again, around the reward or punishment, was a friend said that he would send her a certain amount of money if he drank more, certain amount, more than an X amount of drinks over the course of that week. So there's, shame, accountability, and so on. And so those were a few of the kind of advanced strategies. And before I open it up, I am glad that Eric is on the call, because Eric and a few other people actually pointed out that, especially when it comes with addiction, things like alcohol, that just that you want to have a substitution effect, or you want to substitute that feeling with something else. And that was something that I had kind of missed in thinking about. I had used kind of more of a brute force approach of like not keeping alcohol in my house, which the second you break that dam, then the habit gets thrown out of the window. And so it really got me thinking. Charles, who, I don't know if Charles is on the call, but he was referring to logotherapy, which is related to Viktor Frankl's psychology. I don't think it's positive psychology, but his psychology work, where it is like replacing that craving that you have with something that brings a deeper source of meaning. So I'm glad Eric's here because he's probably knows more about habits than I do. I'd love to hear I'd love for him to explain what you were explaining to me over email. And I have some questions myself about that. So sorry to put you on the spot, Eric.
Can everyone hear me? All right, so I'm helping another person with their habit builder course. So these are things I've learned from there. And he's the one that is saying that it's a habit builder challenge. You're not trying to stop bad habits by just stopping them. You have to build new ones. And like you're saying, the cue, response, reward, all those things. But like even before you figure those out, you have to go a little bit deeper to your identity, because there's something about your identity that's allowing you to use whatever vice you're using. And to go down, try to change that, reframe it, and that will give you that motivation to pursue the better habits.
And do you have advice on how we could do that? So if you take, I'm the patient where, and I think I saw I might pronounce your name wrong, Amarita or Araminta. Sorry, I'm probably pronouncing your name wrong. But what I have found in my own life, and this could be actually quite deep, and it relates to the identity. And this came from my coaching session, my recent coaching session. I talked about this, and I talked about how when I do work, like I love my work, I get lots of little dopamine hits. Like I write a good blog post, I send a good tweet, I host a good AMA, and the amount of hours that I have worked has been halved. And so the amount of dopamine hits that I get from work, which again is a good thing for the most part, has been halved as well. But I still seek that absolute number of dopamine hits that comes from like completing a good piece of work. And then it like there's like a waterfall. So then it's like, okay, well, I can't get it from work. Can I get it from chocolate? I can't get it from chocolate. Can I get it from alcohol? I can't get it from alcohol. Can I get it from burpees? And it's exactly the point that you made, Eric, is like, you're not plugging the hole to the dam. You're plugging the hole to the dam instead of like re-engineering the dam from the ground up. And so where my coach and I landed on is exactly this question of identity, which is my identity is of one of achievement and of doing. And if you eliminate the amount of achievement I'm able to achieve, in this case by just cutting out the free time that I have, then I still crave the feeling that comes from that. And that's why I'm substituting it with all these other things. So that's a lot. That's, like I said, I wasn't kidding when I said productivity as a Trojan horse into the deeply existential. But do you have any? Does anyone have a response to that?
Oh.
Sheila.
Hi everyone. It's good to see you guys. It's such a great thing for you to point that out, because most people never realize that sort of cycle. Because, I mean, obviously, if you look at Buddhist literature, like life is suffering, and that's the nature of our suffering. We're always craving for something. And I think the danger when it comes to like wanting self-improvement is you're basically replacing like one addiction to another. If you go into the 12-step program, people who quit like drinking and drugs, they tend to be sugar junkies. Like they get really fat because it's essentially that you're looking to replace the sort of thing. And it's sort of, at least it's a less harmful addiction. And I think that's something that people just have to be realistic in terms of like, what are you trading in terms of negative behavior? But until you realize like, that craving will not go away unless you sort of reach deep down and sort of be like finding your zen amidst whatever. You're just basically like spinning your wheels and just improving the habit, but it's still sort of like an addiction that you're trying to resolve. So there's no real answer. It's sort of like, I mean, that's how people get into this. It's so fun. But it's being honest with yourself and realizing like there's no easy fix. Like you have to make peace with yourself or God or whatever it is, because you're going to be chasing after that. And if you're looking for like something like this or anything else to kind of make you whole, you're going to set yourself up for multiple disappointments. And sometimes that's what you need. But yeah, I just wanted to make that point, and not to say that it's unhelpful to do these types of things. It's just that there's a trap when you think like, oh, as long as I can do this, if this, then that, then I'll be okay. And ooh, and then you get to the other side and you're like, oh, still not. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Oh, thank you, Sheila. That's amazing. Yeah, Nesreen, go for it.
Yeah, so I agree completely with what Sheila just said, and thank you for pointing that out about being peaceful. So for my case, I haven't suffered from a form of addiction. However, I have had anxiety at a very young age, at 19. So I had to deal with these panic attacks, and maybe some of you know what anxiety is, and these questions. In order to escape my anxiety, when I was only like 19, 20, I became some sort of a workaholic. I just worked so much. I've done so much. And until I reached a breakthrough moment, like last year in 2018. So I've accomplished this big, I'm a project manager, so I accomplished this big event, this big project. And I came home at my apartment, and I closed the door, and I felt completely alone. I was some sort of the peak of somehow my career, and I was admired by my peers. Many people wanted to see me. I had good network. I had good family. I'm good at my work. I'm somehow smart. That's what they say. So why did I feel this lonely? And at that moment, I just decided to quit Facebook primarily, and I started this journey on not feeding my ego and rediscovering myself. And I think what Sheila said about like the philosophy of, I'm looking here because Sheila is here on my screen. Yeah. So what she said, and there is a quote that, if you allow me to share with everyone, of Miyamoto Musashi, which is a famous Japanese swordsman, in his book called A Book of Five Rings. It's a book about martial strategy. He said, "Today is the victory over yourself of yesterday. Tomorrow is your victory over lesser men." And I think how I interpret this quote is that being the lesser man can be ourselves as well. Sometimes we need to detach ourselves from being me. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah.
And just to view ourselves as a cube. For example, this is the cube. So we are here, and we simply switch the cube and look at the other face of the cube. And it has helped me, but it's a journey, so it's not easy.
Wow.
I hope this helps.
Thank you for sharing that. Can you drop in the name of that book and that quote, because it was you broke up a little bit as you were saying it, so we could read it.
Yeah, sure.
One question that my coach, my philosopher, he doesn't like being called a coach. He's a practical philosopher, and so we have he's my conversation partner, and we philosophize about existential questions about life every 3 weeks for 2.5 hours. He said when you pursue an activity, because I was telling him how I love my work and all that. He was like, when you pursue an activity, do you really love it? Like, is it like imbued with love? And I just like rattled through so many of the things that I do, like exercise and surfing and rad reads and, hanging out with my kids and running and meditation. And it was just like this, like, whoa, like, because there's one part, I told my wife this, and she's like, well, not everything you do could be like filled with love and joy. And you know, some people would take the other side of that. I think, but there's this one starting belief that like you have to suffer for good things to happen, which we can debate or discuss that. But it was more just like this like purity of motivation, right? And so I took it something like super practical, where like I write rad reads like on Saturday morning, and I'm like so immersed in the essay, like I have so much fun. I love it. It's really one of those things where time melts away. But after I finish the essay, then I start like driving people to the Slack group, and then I start like linking the archive to like get more traffic, and then I start like promoting a partnership or a course or like something like that, and like the intensity of love starts to like really quickly dissipate, and by the end I hit send and I'm like, I need a drink. um, and uh, and so the point that he was arguing was that he's like, when the love stops, you stop. And it was just like this. I'm like, I can't do that. That's my business. Like, you know, that's my traffic. That's this. And his whole point, he's like, you're proving my point. Right? He's like, you don't need to write rad reads every Saturday. You have decided, because it's your identity, to write it every Saturday. And so again, I think it's almost like, it might be even harder in like when you love your work, like at least when you hate your work, it's just like you shut the door and you're like, okay, that thing's done, and like now I'm gonna do this thing. But when you love it, it's so like it's actually deeper. It really becomes your identity. And these are like these powerful questions of identity that are actually much harder to escape. And so the other thing he asked is like, and so I encourage you to all think about this when you're thinking about habits and the things that might lead you to bad habits. Like you know, I think he said, I'll get you the exact quote. It's like, is the love breathing through? Is the love in this activity breathing through, or is it smothered? And it was just, again, like what Sheila said, like there's no answer. I kept telling him, I was like, what's the answer, coach? You know, and he's like, there is no answer. He's like, just sit with this feeling, you know? And so he basically like had me meditate. So anyway, I will stop there. This is powerful stuff. Like, we're not even talking about habits. We jump straight to identity. Does anyone else is this relatable to anyone else? Does anyone else have a question? I'd love to hear what others think about all this.
I could mention quickly something interesting on my side. And by the way, you did pronounce my name correctly, Arminta. Right.
Arminta. Where is it from? The origin?
It's British. It's from an old book written in the 1700s. Doesn't really mean much, from a fiction.
Okay.
British guy, so I guess you could say he was British. But
cool. Yeah. I'm glad you're on the call, because what this like long monologue that I just had, I was going to respond to your email basically with what I just said, and now I don't have to write it.
Now you don't have to. Awesome. Perfect. So it's funny actually that you mentioned the like a difference between loving and hating your work. I think there's a middle ground, and a lot of people seem to feel like it's either you love it or you hate it. So I'm in an interesting position where I actually like it. I like it. I don't love it. It's not like I mean, it's difficult to explain because I really, really enjoy it. But I know that there's another step further. Like, this is not my ambition. Like, I have a few more things to do, let's just say. And so it is part of my identity, like what you just said. But I'm very strict with when I work. So I work, 8:30 to around 5:30, Monday to Friday. I don't work on weekends. I'm really tempted to, but I don't. So I found that by setting really, really strict boundaries, I was able to, enjoy the time from 9 and I still enjoy it. I literally look forward to every Monday. But I could look forward to it and not get burnt out. That was the main thing. I realized that if I worked past 5:30 p.m. in the evenings or even on the weekends, I'd get burnt out, and then I'd be like, now it's getting a bit too much. And I think there's no shame in admitting that you can get burnt out from things that you really, really enjoy doing. Like it happens.
Wow.
And actually I realized that if I allocated time to like turning off, I'd eventually get even better at doing things that I did from Monday to Friday. I was literally twice more productive, because there's a big difference. Just because you work more hours doesn't mean that you're more productive. I think that makes sense, right? And so I've realized that there's a balance, and that just by choosing to work fewer hours and more productively, I could, work more. So I completely understand what you're saying. I just set really strong boundaries. So.
Thank you. Does anyone else, I mean, solo creators or anyone, have you felt your, proclivity to burnout increase during the pandemic? Like, do you feel more burnt out or less burnt out? I'd love to hear how people are feeling about burnout in general in this time.
I think for me, one of the interesting things is that when you leave the office, you get that distinction, and when you're working from home,
The cue.
there, you might go home and do a couple emails or a call or something like that, but you had that separation. Whereas now, there's no end to it, and on the one hand, it is. I'm definitely working a heck of a lot more. I'm working, 12, 16-hour days and 6, 7 days a week. And, my wife as well. And so it's becoming part of the routine. It doesn't feel so much like burnout though. Obviously there are certainly days that are tougher than others, but I think it's also a little bit of a distraction. And it's a little bit of a way to escape having to think about, especially for us sort of being in the middle of New York City, a lot of the weirdness that's going on around us. But with that, there is the need to have a routine, even with that. So making sure to get up at a decent hour, to exercise, to eat healthy, to have sort of moments and times to try and make it actually have a little bit of structure to it.
Yeah.
That definitely helps. But I think the burnout element of it really comes with more thinking about how much you get sucked into the sort of all of the different things that are pulling at you, all of the tensions, as opposed to being able to focus on a single thing. The 20 minutes or so a day that I'm actually able to focus on a single thing, regardless of whatever that task or action is, are probably the most helpful. But obviously it comes at the trade-off of trying to keep track of everything else that's going on and not knowing exactly which one's the priority at any one time.
Yeah. You got me thinking about focus. One thing that has really helped me on the focus side, and that was actually that there wasn't that many of you who said that was something you wanted, that like a habit or a practice you wanted to get better at. But one thing that has really helped me is I've always worked in like streaks, in like blocks of time. So Pomodoros, for those of you who are familiar, it's like basically working for 25-minute increments. And like I'm very strict about them. Like you can't go to the bathroom. Like if you check your phone, it doesn't count, like the 25-minute. And I try to do like 2 to 4 a day, which is like, it sounds like so crazy, but it's like, wait, you 4 times 25 minutes of uninterrupted work. So like, what has the world become that feels like insane? But one tiny thing that has helped with that is actually, here it's just a tool, but there's a Chrome extension that's like a Pomodoro timer. So again, it's a cue. I just see the little timer in the corner, and it just reminds me like, oh yeah, I should fire off the timer. So that might be one thing. Anyone else?
I can add an app to that. There is this app called Forest. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it.
I've heard of it, but describe it, please.
Yeah, so it's a great app. It's an app where basically you grow a tree for a certain amount of the minutes. And if you use your phone while there is this timer, your tree dies. So you feel guilty because you killed your tree. And it might sound really silly, but once you start using it, you become hooked because you have your forest every day, and you see how many trees you've planted. So it's it's a gamification of deep focus, I
Yeah.
think.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
yeah, and I think there is something that Araminta said earlier on about like this feeling of shame about not when you. I think we need to be forgiving with ourselves, and we are going the world, and we are going through a crisis, and I think we need to acknowledge that this is not a competition for productivity, but maybe this is a time to think deeply about the root of our being.
Mhm. Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you. Um, the app, so Forest is the name of the app, and Habit Share. Excellent. Um, with that, I mean, we could open it up. We can these are Q&As, so I'm always happy to just have to talk more broadly about anything that's on your mind. If anyone has anything that they want to add, so I'm gonna open up a pop-up Facebook group on Sunday night, and so for 3 days we're gonna just compare notes, keep ourselves accountable. I guess it shouldn't even be about habits. It should be about like our identities, but maybe we'll save that for a different challenge down the road. But does anyone have any other questions more broadly? Things you want to talk about? Things any wins that you want to celebrate? Fire away. Go for it.
The Facebook, that's only for 3 days.
Yeah, it's just like a small pop-up one just to get us started. Maybe down the road. I've never done a challenge before. So down the road, I probably will do something more elaborate. But that was just the thinking.
Yeah, it usually takes longer to build
Oh
a
yeah,
habit, and to have that kind of community of people wanting to do new habits, to have a longer length
totally,
of time, I think would be really helpful.
totally. Okay, what do you think's a good amount of time?
The challenge that I did was 21 days,
21 days.
but it could take up to 66 days.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe we'll collaborate on a longer one. The reason I did 3 is because I didn't have that to Araminta's point of burnout. Like I just didn't have the energy to moderate it for more than 3 days. Questions? I think Nesreen was going to ask a question or add a.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question. I'm sorry, I might seem like I have a lot of questions because I do have a lot of questions. I've been waiting for this webinar, and I want to thank everyone on this webinar because it's such a wholesome conversation, and I feel connected to everyone. So thank you so much. Yeah, so my question is about like digital note taking. So I'm kind of new to Notion, and I'm also taking few online courses. But I've been struggling with taking notes. Like I don't know what's the most efficient way to take notes. I've been using progressive summarization, the technique of Tiago Forte, and combined with the review and other techniques. However, I don't know if this compilation of notes, how I can make the most out of it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know there's some second brainers on this call. I'm looking at Eric. I think I see there might be a few others looking at the names. I guess note taking. So for those of you who aren't familiar with building a second brain and Tiago, and there's a lot of like, and I say this lovingly because he's a dear friend of mine. It's like a lot of like cultish behavior here with like acronyms and insider jokes and insider language and things like that. But basically, Tiago teaches this really incredible course on building a second brain, which is a mix of note taking and like personal knowledge management, like what he calls PKM, which is kind of where you keep all of your your digital information, your receipts, your notes on books, your highlights on Kindles. Like he creates a very comprehensive system for that. When it comes to note taking, I mean, I would say like I think you. How would I answer the question of note taking? I would say that the starting principle would be, and I'm way less structured in my thinking than Tiago on this stuff, and I can tell you why. But the starting point would be to like minimize friction, which is like if something's like if you need to open lots of apps and like you need your computer, your desktop, you need a certain amount of RAM, like to do stuff like note taking is already starting to break down in the sense that like there you've added a friction to it. I would say the other thing with note taking is to think about your future self, right? Like so there's this trade-off, right? Because you don't know. Actually, you had spoken about it. You don't know the needs of your future self. You can anticipate them. You can make a good guess, but like take for example, I worked on Wall Street for 15 years, and so I always thought that my future self would work on Wall Street, like continue to work on Wall Street until like the end when I left. And so let's say I would read some of the most boring papers on options pricing and derivatives trading and stochastic processes and like all this stuff that like I I can't even like see the words now. They make me cringe because I just have no interest in it. But so let's say I'm taking notes on these things. So there's a trade-off, right? Because I can like cement the information today and hope that my future self finds it useful, or I can not do anything and know that I haven't set my future self up at all for it, right? And so like it just completely disappears. And so it's always like finding that trade-off between the two. Thank God. I mean, I wrote extensive notes on option, like notebooks full and like all those, and like I don't even look at them. So you could say that I wasted some time doing that, and my future self isn't benefiting from that. But I just would encourage you to think about that trade-off that you're making every time you decide to take notes and how detailed those notes go. The next thing is, how will you find a way to resurface those notes, right? Because I think a lot of like note taking is very serendipitous. And so how can you create serendipity in your note taking? And that's challenging. Like, Tiago uses like a random note generator in Evernote that when he needs his dopamine hit, wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't drink. Like when he needs his dopamine hit, he hits a random note generator that he created himself for his Evernote, and it just surfaces like random notes for him. So that might be one, like, but I would say like, how can you create serendipity? I think I'm not a huge fan of, not a huge fan, I just don't use it, but readwise.io takes your Kindle highlights and every day sends you 5 random ones. Like that's a wonderful serendipity tool with very, very low lift. I actually do create like a random number generator, and then I resurface old Notion notes. People like Roam for that reason, because Roam is another note-taking app which can create creates serendipity through interconnectivity. That's a much longer conversation, but those are like different ways. So I would encourage you to think of that trade-off, and then kind of adjust accordingly, and then think about how you can bring serendipity into your notes. I have actually stopped becoming a hardcore second brainer in that regards, where I've stopped being a second brainer where I actually take a lot less notes and highlights on things I read and podcasts I listen to. And this might be for, I might have said this on a previous call, so tell me if I did. But basically, as a writer, I'm always trying to go back to things, stories, anecdotes, things that I like collected in the past. I've tried all these systems. I have reams of notes and terabytes of data of notes, probably not terabytes, but yet whenever I needed something for my writing, I would just go to Google. And Google was just good enough in finding that thing that I needed to find on the public web. That would be one thing. And the other thing was like my memory was actually really good. So like I was like wanting that story about Michael Jordan when he played on UNC. Like I remember that was like an Adam Grant, like New York Times article. And so I can kind of customize my Google search to get there quickly. One of my favorite articles, Paul Graham's Do Things That Don't Scale. I've probably progressively summarized and sliced and diced that article across 8 different PKM systems. Every time I reference it, I just go to the article. And visually, I know exactly what I'm looking for just by seeing it on the web. So it's like, don't underestimate the power of your brain. And then lastly, and we can change the topic. Lastly, the thing that I have used as to remember a lot of these things instead of note taking is if I hear a good story, like on last week's call, Ozan was just dropping knowledge bombs like none other, and he had just written a book. So he had to think, diversify your identity was one of his chapters. And so I was like, oh, I could like read Diversify Your Identity, put it in Rome, and then like be ready to use it in 5 years when I want to write a post about identity. But instead, I'm just going to write about it on Saturday. And so my notes become like, a lot of people use Twitter for this. Like they kind of like, they think out loud in Twitter. So that's another way. My second brain has become just like cranking out more content, which by the way, makes it Google searchable. But more importantly, we all know this, right? The true test of how well you understand something is your ability to explain it to someone else. And so if I truly understood the argument or the emotion that Ozan's trying to evoke, then if I can recreate that by writing about it, then I've accomplished the thing that I want to accomplish. Sorry, that was a really, really long answer. Anyone else? I don't know if Eric's question about Notion was directed at me or directed at the chat, but happy to answer questions about Notion, about blogging. I know Steve's here. We were talking the other day. Steve was asking. I wanted to check in on his newsletter because he writes a sports newsletter. Steve, you still there? You're on mute though.
Sorry, I got to figure out how to unmute. I got a full house in the bedroom. The newsletter, so what I'm planning to do with it, I still think I'm going to do a Labor Day launch because I want it. What I'm planning on doing basically, I'm going to kind of start with Medium and just kind of the suggestion you had with doing the I guess the stories that are happening now, like but I'm horrible at it because I haven't even watched the Last Dance first episode yet. So, but I'm watching the draft tonight. But I'm gonna probably just kind of start with Medium for now, as far as blogging, and then kind of do kind of a bigger thing after Labor Day because I decided to postpone till Labor Day. Then I thought of your idea. I was like, well, that makes sense. It's just that's one thing that has killed me by the sports being it's so bad now. I don't have the energy to even like I don't like reading about sports now. One of the places I get a lot of my sports, it's a newsletter I subscribe to daily, is the Axios. They have their politics stuff, but they have their own like sports section. And I can't read it anymore.
Bad.
I mean, the stories, like there's maybe one good story out of their daily 10, and I'm just so I'm going to start small because I really don't have the joy to. I don't know. Like to me, even the esports thing, I think I love the fact that esports is taking off, but I don't have enough passion for esports. Other than me playing it, I'm going to go fire up Madden because they got a draft special going. But beyond that, I don't have the passion to just. So that's where
you're at. Yeah. Well, thanks for the.
Okay. No, I was going to say I did find Trapital pretty great. I know you suggested that to me as well.
Cool. Awesome.
I did like what I saw with Trapital.
and for context, last time Steve was going to start a newsletter, but he loves sports and there's no sports. And so we were kind of debating like what you could do with no sports. And actually it's funny enough, I thought of you because The Last Dance came, and my advice was like, well, write about like all the things to kind of satisfy people's urges on sports in the moment. And then right after that, The Last Dance came out. But but yes, definitely, like, you know, to Andrew's question earlier, like, is the love breathing through? Like, it's at this moment, it's not for you. And since it's not your job, it's not your income, like, you don't have to do it. The flip side, though, that I would say is like one of the great principles that I love. I've been looking for a name. It's like start before you're ready, which is a David Perel thing. So I wouldn't use that. But it's like something like, or just start, or, you know. But I found one phrase that I loved, which is called shitty first drafts. And so it's from Anne Lamott, who's a great writer. But that's a principle that I have espoused for a long time. But shitty first drafts, just get it out and iterate off of the idea. The other thing, because I know that there are some writers here and newsletter folks, the other thing that I want to share, just like a little trick that I use, is to, when possible, write into the zeitgeist. And so the zeitgeist is like the thing that everyone's talking about. And like, yes, like there's like the meta zeitgeist, which is like COVID, which I think at this point, no one wants to write into that zeitgeist. But then there's cultural ones. And again, they're going to be more specific to your, you know, your cultural proclivities, your audiences, your own personal ones. But one of the most, I don't know if you guys are in my Thursday email, but one of the big current like Western zeitgeist is Tiger King, right? It's like one of those few things that like literally 95% of people, your peers, have watched, and not only watched but are like quite invested in it. And for those of you who don't know, it's a Netflix show about some crazy guys who collect tigers, who own tigers. But so today in my newsletter, because I write a Thursday like productivity letter, and the theme of the letter was this Inside Joe Exotic's Notion dashboard. And so, you know, it's in service of my Notion class, which is launching next week. And so I created this full dashboard that is all about that shows like his projects and all that. Actually, I'll share it with you guys. But I'll just tell you, the response was through the roof, because when you write into the thing that people are talking about, it's just like you have wind in your sails. And so you can't force it, right? Like, you got to care about it. But another one for me is The Last Dance. Like, my audience, like, you know, I'm 40. I grew up in the Jordan era. My audience is more men than women, Western. Like, people love Michael Jordan and that period of history. And so, and I want to watch it. So it's like the extra nudge. So it's like, how can I turn this thing that everyone's talking about into some topic that's relevant to my business? So all you aspiring writers, I would encourage you, I actually keep a list of the zeitgeist. And some of it goes really quick. Like, in 2 months, no one's talking about Tiger King. I guarantee you that, unless they release a second season. You know, Cybertruck was a zeitgeist for like a week. And, you know, there's places you can go. You can look at top read stories on Reddit or on New York Times, or your audience's, like, where your audience hangs out. Like, I often go, I would like to appeal to a more diverse audience, like gender-wise. So like, I go read The Cut like more often, and I look at the top stories, because it's not like it's like they're not writing about The Last Dance on The Cut. So I'm trying to understand, like, just get a sense of like what people are talking about. So I just show you this more because I'm just proud of it. This was the dashboard that I created off of Tiger King, and it is like, it's like brilliant fucking marketing, because the thing is, like, people have seen this and they're like, I want my Notion to look like this for myself, which, by the way, that's what I teach in the course. But it's just like, you can't stop looking at it. Like, even as the creator, like I just keep going back at it and laughing at it. And I even did one page deeper where I went in and like gave him a to-do list and his notes and his reading list. So, you know, if you're a writer and you want trying to grow an audience, never always pay attention to the zeitgeist and try to write into it. All right, we got time for one more question, if anyone's got anything. Yes, Nesreen, go for it.
I was curious about your writing creative process because
Yeah.
so I am not English is my third language, and I speak Arabic, French, and English. And I am trying to write more consistently and to practice my writing in English, but I feel stuck sometimes. I just feel that I judge myself before others judge me. So I just can't publish that article that I've written on Medium because I'm just so scared that I messed up the grammar or I messed up the vocabulary or something like that. So I was just curious about your creative process.
The you know, that the again it's funny how so many of these questions come back to identity, right? It's like you have the identity of someone who doesn't make grammar mistakes, who, you know, has their stuff together, dialed in. A few ways. It's totally just like it's totally normal to want to put out your best work, and to represent yourself in a way that's consistent with how you see yourself. A few things that might help. One is if you're if you feel it really strongly, just write privately. Like don't write on Medium, write like in a Google Drive and share it with, you know, 5 friends, 10 friends. Like share it with a closed off group where you know that they won't judge you, but you'll still get the benefit of their feedback, their interaction, the satisfaction that, you know, that they read it. So that would be one way, is to write privately. If you really want to take this on extreme, there's Julia Cameron's morning pages, which we've talked about in this call, where I'll put it in the notes, where she says write 750 words or 3 pages, and then put it in a drawer and never look at it again. And so it really becomes about training the muscle versus the actual output. So you remove the output from the equation. So that would be one way to start. I could give you something way more pragmatic, which is no one's going to read it. When you start writing, no one reads it. I mean, that's the reality. And the people who do read it, actually, the person who read it, it will be your mom, and your mom will point out your grammar mistakes. But since you're writing in your third language, your mom probably will give you the benefit of the doubt. But my mom still, you're unmuted.
My article, my fiance has read it and he corrected me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but he just clapped 50 times. So
my mom still to this day sends me my typos. So I think that would be one thing to remember. Is like no one's going to read it. It's a little bit like the morning pages, like you're doing it for yourself. And then the last thing I would say is that it's just like anything, it's just a muscle. You just do it over and over and over again. You show up, shitty first drafts become great first drafts. And I think Tiago has this metaphor, which I believe he got from Venkatesh Rao, which is like streams versus containers. So we used to come from a world of containers, which is like a closed system, like the PDF. Like my old boss, like he still, like when someone sends him a Google Doc, he prints it as a PDF to preserve the closed end nature of that document. Like the fact that things can move once he's looked at it in a certain way is like bewildering to him. But we live in a world of streams now where like everything's kind of a living document, you know, even a Medium post is a living document. I mean, I'll tell you all that like I've written the same post like 15 times. I've just like changed the headline. I've changed the anchor story to it. You know, like for example, like the number. I write a lot about the number, the elusive myth that like one number will make all your problems go away, like one financial number. Like I've written a version of that story 20 times. And each time it's gotten slightly better. And the better one is always indexed to my SEO so that if you search, you know, he, the number, it will pull up that last one and I delete all the old ones. But I just like, again, it's just like, it's a stream, right? Like, it's just like almost like a stream of consciousness that we snapshot in time. And it feels like it's a container, but really it's a living document because you append on it through comments and through, you know, writing about it in your email. So streams versus containers. Even Kanye's album, right? The Life of Pablo. People were appalled that he like kept re-releasing it multiple times after and like tweaking it. And people are like, "What the hell?" They're like, "You can't do that." You know, like the album is a container, and he's like, "Watch me, it's a stream." You know, he says, "Watch me," maybe one too many times for my own preferences. But again, you know, he redefined it. He redefined the medium from a container to a stream.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Y'all rock. Thank you, everyone. These are fun. I have no idea what next Thursday is going to be about. I might actually get my friend Tara Schuster. She's a great author. If she can join, she has a book called Buy Yourself the Effin' Lilies, which is about like an abundance mindset. It's about like negative self-talk. Sheila, look it up. I think, you know, you would definitely like, based on some of the conversations we had, I think you would really dig her, but she's hilarious. So self-deprecating, and just funny. So I'm trying to get her, see if I could get her on the next call. All right. See everyone soon. Have a wonderful day. Get to meet a lot of new faces. Bye.